Hey, it's me again. You guys actually must be so sick of my voice at this point, but alas, I host the podcast, so you have to deal with it. This episode is the first installment of Why Do You Expert Like That? And if you missed my announcement about what that is, basically I have lined up a bunch of experts who I'm going to get to release bonus episodes every 6 weeks. I'll invite different experts on to parenting adjacent topics. So this week is Joe Robertson, who did our main episode as well, but it won't always be the people who did the main episode. And I'm taking listener submitted questions and then posing them to the experts. So if you didn't get a chance or see where the opportunity to submit questions was, I post them on my Instagram. So if you want to submit a question to our next expert, I will be posting the link on our Instagram. Joe answered these questions with such grace and kindness and sincerity and loveliness and helpfulness. So I really hope that the listeners that submitted these questions find it valuable, and that it's also valuable even to the people who didn't submit the questions. Yeah, enjoy this episode. I really enjoyed filming it. I'm really excited about this. Why do you expert like that? I think it's going to be a really cool part of this podcast. So enjoy.
Why do you parent like that?
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our very first episode of Why Do You Expert Like That, which is super exciting. So you have already seen that Jo has done a main record with us, so she's released an episode of Why Do You Parent Like That, and that was brilliant. But now I want to pick her brain even more, and we have been very lucky to get some listener questions submitted for Jo to answer, and so what we're going to do is basically just go through, I think we've got 5 submitted questions, and go through them all, and Jo's going to give us her expertise. So are you ready to jump right in, Jo?
Yeah, love it.
Lay it on ya. Okay, the first question is from Anon, and it is it a bad thing if me and my partner aren't having frequent sex after kids? For context, I'm a woman and my partner is a man, and we have 2 toddlers with a 2-year age gap. We talked a lot through my pregnancy that intimacy would take a backseat for a while, and we've kept those discussions open since. We roughly have sex once a month, but sometimes a bit longer. We're both happy with this, and again, discuss it openly often. Despite feeling content with our situation, social media can be so loud about having to regain the same intimacy you had pre-kids. Sometimes I feel like we must be doing something wrong if we aren't actively working towards that. I don't think the amount of times you have sex in a month post-kids is our measure of relationship success, but it seems to be everyone else's. Am I wrong? How do I navigate this worry going forward?
I think this is all sounding really healthy. I think it sounds great. I love that they talked about intimacy before they had the kids or before they had each child, and talked about that postpartum season. I love that it's what I call an alive conversation now, that they have what I also call an authentic agreement. So there's authentic agreements and then there's false agreements. False agreements is when you've said the same thing and in theory agreed, but one person actually just gave in, and they don't really want that, but they're compromising themselves. And compromise is perfectly reasonable as long as both people are doing it, but when it's just one person, it's not that healthy. So it sounds great to me. I don't have any expectation on couples to do what is right for another couple. Like, you should absolutely be doing what's right for you. It would be way worse for your relationship for you to be doing something that either of you really weren't up for and we're just doing for the sake of what, society? Not at all. It sounds great to me.
Well, do you have any advice for navigating that worry of the noise?
Yeah.
I
think unfollow anybody who's giving you anxiety.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah. So I think if you're feeling, internal pressure or external pressure from certain voices, whether those voices are friends or whether they're online influencers, just get rid of those voices in your life. You don't need that, particularly in that season of life where you're already navigating so much and you're probably already really tired and stretched emotionally. So don't add to the load. And I would say that of myself too, as in if people find that any of my content or what I talk about is too much for them at the moment, unfollow me. That's not the purpose of the platform. The purpose is to serve people and to bring, positive messaging. And if any of it is landing badly, definitely jump off. That's what's best for you.
Yeah.
I also think the stories that get told, and maybe this is something that's just to hold in your mind, is that the stories that get told are more often very positive ones when it comes to sex. So we don't often hear a lot of real life stories or a lot of hard stories. And that's because people have shame about that. They feel embarrassed. They feel like it's a reflection of their relationship if sex isn't going well. They feel like it's a reflection of their femininity or their masculinity. And so it's kind of a lot of big feelings when it comes to sex. And so people just tell the good stories generally. And what that means is that there's a lot of people out there who are not having sex at all or way less than that. And really, if you have a pattern in your relationship, a frequency, a type of sex that is good and pleasurable, you're doing far better, I would say, probably than the majority. Like, that's phenomenal. You should be proud.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, I have to add to the unfollowing that if it's a friend that is producing noise that you don't love, the mute button is a beautiful, beautiful thing. You don't need to unfollow them if you don't want to create awkwardness, but that mute button is, I love it. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, I've done that before. I actually did that when I was having an extremely difficult time with the newborn season, and other people in my life were having really lovely newborn seasons and just talking about how much they were enjoying it, and it was just beautiful, and they just wanted to do it all again, and I had to mute that because it was too, I had too much shame then as a parent. I was like, deal with this.
I think often we forget that we are in control of our feeds. We can control, like, we are not slaves to our feed. That is something that we can fix, which is great. Okay, great. What a lovely first question. You're doing great, babe. Keep it going. You're nailing it. Cool. So our second question is from Renee from Little People Big Emotions, which, hey, Renee, we love you.
Yeah.
And she said, I would love to know if Jo ever gets imposter syndrome and how she overcomes that. Does she ever feel like she isn't qualified enough to talk to a whole room of people? And how does she overcome that? / how long did it take her to overcome that? Was she always amazing at public speaking, or was that something that you had to do training for?
Okay, thank you, Renee. That's quite a few questions.
She's like, I'm going to do 5 questions.
Yeah. Do I get imposter syndrome? Yes, I do. Not as much as I used to. But I did actually this week have to do a presentation to a lot of government people. And it's not as much imposter syndrome as, it's not like me feeling, oh, I don't know enough, I'm not qualified enough. What I'm actually thinking is, are they judging me for other parts of my work? So I like, are they judging me for the fact that I'm a sex therapist? Are they judging me for the fact that I went on, I was on Married at First Sight as the expert? Like, are they questioning who I am as a person? And so that probably sits there more often because I wear so many different hats. But no, what was important to me in my career journey was doing really exceptional training. So I can lean back on that all the time. So I did my master's in sex therapy through University of Sydney. Like, I went hard where I could academically, and the only next thing I could do would be to do my PhD. And that's, in the pipeline, but a few years away. So I can't be more qualified, so to speak, at the moment. Yeah, but I always fear judgment, I think, and that's really human. I used to feel more imposter syndrome about being young because I came to the profession quite early, and so I would often be, not as much anymore, but I would often be the youngest person in a room, but still the one speaking or sharing or asserting my opinion. So I felt insecure about that for a long time, and I actually always tried to dress older than I was. But then Holly, my colleague with Make Sense, she said to me recently, she's like, I don't think you need to worry about that anymore. I was like,
you're like, okay, call me grandma.
Yeah.
I felt like that as a young social worker as well. I was always hyper aware that I would be like the youngest person in the room and be like, well, this is what I think about child protection. Like, I could just see people being like, you don't know anything.
Yes. Yeah. And there is some truth, to the fact that, time gives you wisdom. But I had done a lot of education, and I had, continuously gone to training workshops and all the things. So I was quite clued up. With the public speaking thing, yes, always a bit of strength. So I won my primary school speech competition.
Nice. What was the topic?
The topic was being like cross-cultural differences. So in
Great.
our other podcast where I talked about being in the Philippines, and I was born there and grew up there
Hmm.
for a bit. So I gave some examples about how things are done differently in the Philippines than in New Zealand. And it was a
Look at you sharing perspectives from other people from a young age.
well, I really just wanted to win the competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, was always fairly good at being in front of a room. I am better in front than in. So I feel quite anxious in a group, and I'm not.
Right.
I'm actually quite shy in terms of
Hmm.
being in a group. I will like sit in the corner, like I'm quite. It's not like yeah, it's like socially insecure. I
Yeah.
think I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to be awkward. There's going to be silences. I'm not going to know how to manage. I like just
Yeah.
zone out a little bit. But
Yeah.
if you put me in front of a room, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's like that's where I have more confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all that comes to mind on those subjects. But I still train, like I still work hard on the public speaking piece. So when I did the
Yeah.
TED Talk, for example, I spent like just an incredible amount of hours practicing that. Like, I think I did
Yeah.
it would have been at least 100 hours and did it for weeks on end full time and watched to, practiced things online and watched a whole bunch of different styles of speaking and practiced my tone and my body language. And
Mm,
it's not like it's a craft that you get and then just stop using,
yeah.
like, sorry, stop growing in. So I'm always growing in it. I'm always
It's a
thinking,
muscle.
how could I tell that story better? How could I be more clear? Yeah. A couple of years back, I went to a workshop on, well, it was actually on comedy. It wasn't on comedy. It was a comedian running it, but it was the art of telling stories. And so I still am always trying to upskill, even though it's where I feel
Yeah.
most confident.
I think that's awesome because as someone who has been to your like talks or workshops and who has watched your TED talk and seen your maths and all those sorts of things, like you are an incredibly engaging speaker and a very like captivating storyteller. And I think that sometimes that can get not diminished, but pushed aside in terms of how important that is. But when you've got really important information that you want to get across, the best way you can get that across is by being a really interesting speaker.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you're like putting time and effort into something that's sort of a bit of an undervalued asset
Yeah.
and is almost sort of seen as something that you either have or you don't.
Yes.
And you proving that like, and no, you can work on it and you can train that and you can exercise
Definitely.
that is so cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, I really genuinely consider it a craft, and
Mm,
it's like an art form. Public speaking is,
yeah.
and I think it's so important in my work. So it's not important for
Mm,
everyone's work, but I genuinely would consider it a failure if people had come experience like learned some information but hadn't enjoyed the experience.
yeah.
Like that is not okay for me. They have to feel engaged. They have to feel like I get them, that they get me, that we're
Mm,
connected in some way, that I'm more than spilling information, that I am
mm,
really trying to convey a strong message. Yeah.
cool.
I rate myself every time. Like Dave's always like, what was it? And I'll
Oh.
rate it. And that's never about information. That's
Yeah.
always about communication.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know
That's so
exactly when I've
interesting.
done well and not done well.
Yeah. And that's reassuring, I guess, for Renee specifically, but for anyone else listening to this, is that like it is something you can work on. It's
Yes.
not like it's not a part, it's not you've got it or you don't. It's like you can work on it. If you're
Yeah.
feeling insecure about it, there's ways you can upskill that, which is awesome.
Yeah, I've worked with colleagues at trying to at helping them with that piece of their life. So lots of people have tics and they say certain things over and over again while they do public speaking, or what they do with their tone is that they go up at the end of a sentence, or they do various
Hmm.
things that until someone says, "Hey, did you know that you do this all the time?"
Yeah.
They can't change it because it's a tic. They're completely unaware. And it's a nervous tic. And so, yeah,
Mm.
I've worked with other people at just helping them to grow that confidence.
Start a podcast as well if you want to find out what you say way too much or
Yeah.
just as you do too much. Or, man, it's really confronting very early on about things you say way too much. Yes,
Yeah, that
classic.
would be true.
All Right, we'll move on to the next question, which I think I've seen you talk about before, so I'm excited to hear about this. It's mum of 3 boys here. Will I ever get through the gender disappointment? I hope it goes without saying that I love them with all my heart, but man, I am so sad I won't have a daughter. Like, I think about it every day. It's not about pink clothes and pigtails. I want that motherline experience. I genuinely feel like the little girl is missing from my life. Is it just like grief and that it'll always hurt a bit, but it's just life?
Yeah, I think it'll come in waves. So, and some of those waves will run longer than others. Some of them will be more like you have to really surf it, and others will be a ripple. So it's not there all the time. Sometimes the water is calm. And sometimes when that water is calm, you're even really happy for other people and you can look on with joy and you can look at your 3 boys and be like, I'm so glad this is what I have. And, that's when the water is calm. But it's unpredictable when you have to ride a bigger wave or there's a ripple. So like recently, for example, something happened with a dad and a daughter, a friend of ours. I can't even remember it specifically, but he did something with his daughter. Maybe he was doing her hair or he was dancing with her or there was some kind of moment, and I went home and I cried, and I could cry now thinking about it, and it's that, oh, I'll never see Dave do that. And
Yeah.
so I think, but I hadn't really felt that feeling in a year prior to that. So I had a long period of calm water, and then it wasn't a wave, but it was a ripple that I had to walk through. Then there's been other seasons where it stayed with me for months. And that's more the surfing the big wave. I think that I will face that really significantly when it comes to ball season. So when when all the mums are taking their daughters out to go pick dresses, like that will be really rough. I think it could be rough soon when some of my friends' daughters, like for example, go through puberty. I think that could be hard because I've always wanted to have those kinds of conversations with a daughter growing up to be a woman, and what does that mean, and feeling like those, wanting them to have really positive experiences of puberty and moving into womanhood. And so that's that will be a bit of a wave, probably not as big as the ball one. And then of course when it comes to weddings and births, and that'll be extremely difficult. In the early years when it was big, hard, because I was watching friends have girls, I would reach out to another mum who also had 3 boys and vent. It was the best thing. It wasn't like a friend that I see. It was just a person that I knew from the past who also had 3 boys. And she said to me, you always have permission to be upset, angry, disappointed. You can say all the things to me and it will always be fine.
Yeah.
And so I did that. So, when I found out one of my best friends has 3 boys and then went on to have a girl. And so that was really hard. She's my goddaughter, like I'm close to her, but took me a lot actually to move through that one. And I would just message her, and it was the best thing, feeling like I didn't need to justify my feelings. I didn't need to offer any caveats. Like I could just say it how it was. And it was so, so meaningful to me. And so if anyone ever feels like they want to do that to me, I'm like, I'm perfectly fine. And she wouldn't give like hugely robust responses, but it was just validation. It was the feeling that your feelings are okay, and somebody kind of standing in the wave with you for a bit of time.
Yeah.
So I think that it goes but comes back. I think it's waves. I don't think it hurts all the time. That's not been my experience. As time goes on, it hurts less and less, but then every once in a while
there's something. Yeah. And I hope it goes without saying to this person that like gender disappointment is valid, and you aren't a bad person for feeling that ache of wanting a girl. That's absolutely valid. Yeah. And it's specifically, I think the gender piece is really a great word for it. So it's gender disappointment, because it's not sex disappointment. It's not. Yeah. Because you can have a female sex child who grows up and just plays sport the whole time and doesn't do anything traditionally female. Yeah. And so it's not, it's the imagining you have of what it means to grow a girl. And so that's not necessarily reality. Because you can have a daughter that never gets married and never has children. So it's an image, it's an imagination, it's not real. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's gender disappointment, because it's what you associate with what it means to be a girl that you've missed out on. And and there are some things that, at least to me, seems that there are more realities, like boys seem to talk less
to their parents as into adulthood than daughters do. So I fully anticipate that I will have less communication with my children than my friends might with their daughters. And I anticipate that ahead of time. And my mother-in-law has 3 sons. And so we've talked to some extent about it. She doesn't like to dwell in the disappointment land. She's very much on the silver lining kind of pathway. But which is not me, because I'd prefer to just talk about the feeling.
Yeah, not me either.
But she's talked about how you learn that your role is different, and you come to accept your role and also see the beauty in some of your role. And that's really great. I think there are things that I can do when they're adults, when maybe they have children, to feel more connected, but it will be probably different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'm unlikely to go to any of their births.
But also my mum was not at either of my births. I was like, I don't want her in that room at all. She doesn't want to be in that room. I don't want her in that room. And we're very close, and she still wasn't there. So, it is that thing that you say of like the imagined versus the reality. Yeah, totally. Well, lots of love to you, Anon. All right, we'll move on to the next one. Hi, Joe. My partner and I have been trying to conceive for over 20 months. It took 12 months for us to conceive with Mr. 3, and by the end of that journey, it took me a long time to get back to sex for pleasure rather than baby making. As you can imagine, it taking longer this time, going through all the fertility journey stuff and balancing parenting, making us more tired in the evening. Sexy time is even harder now, and frankly, a chore I do during the fertility week. I'm about to start counselling in part to address this, and he is very, very supportive, but wondering if you have anything you could suggest, and maybe some hope that one day desire will come back, as I fear the fertility journey will be the end of fun for us. Thank you.
It's so hard.
So hard.
So hard. Such real life stuff. Such kind of, that just is challenging. And, I don't want to underestimate how challenging that is by throwing on some quick strategies. It's just really, really hard, and it may be for quite some time. So, I don't want to.
And it's easy for me to read a word or a time frame like, oh, it's taken us over 20 months to conceive. That's easy to read, but actually living those 20 months, that feels like a lifetime.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and every month, counting the days, taking the tests, like all the things. It's so difficult watching other people get pregnant. I talked about that in the other episode. The devastation that you feel is so intense. It cannot be minimized at all.
And it already feels so all-consuming, the fact that it also starts to eat away at your sex life as well. You're like, is there anything that this process is not going to ruin?
And it is. That's so true. It's like a tsunami ripping through your life, taking over. With couples that I've worked with who are trying to conceive, doing a fertility process, I encourage them to hold intercourse just for the times when they need to, and the rest of the time it's off limits, and that they might just have other kinds of pleasure or play.
Cool.
It stops. Those times are not about procreation.
Yeah.
That there's designated times that are purely about that, and then others that are not at all going to be about that. So I would recommend, in those other times, trying a few different vibrators, like accessing arousal more quickly will probably be helpful, and building your body's response more quickly. And you're probably more likely to experience climax, for example, and that's going to be better for your long-term feeling of desire. So just making sure that you still have some wins. You need wins on the table. And it also, vibrators are really helpful for when you feel like you're really tired and you just want to get to arousal, that much more quickly. You don't want to make out for 20 minutes and you want to be in the zone within a few minutes. Like, that's going to be really helpful. I don't recommend it every time, but it's a tool. It's an aid for a season of life, or for those times when you just need that extra support. That's how I see it. Sometimes I don't even call them sex toys. I call them sex aids, because it's how do we use this thing to support us in the same way that we would, put tape on an ankle that's struggling. It's something that needs extra. How do we wrap around it a bit more? I love that they're talking about it, that the other partner is really, really supportive. That's phenomenal. It makes me really happy. Sometimes we think that intimacy needs to look a certain way. So lots of people think if we're having sex, we need to be doing all the things. We need to have intercourse. It needs to be different types of foreplay. And honestly, intimacy can be like a hand job in the shower. And like sometimes we
Yeah,
do,
100%.
yeah, sometimes we need to do little bits of gift. And so I want to do this for you, but I don't feel up for anything else. And that's
Yeah.
okay. So it's essentially it's like diversifying their sex life a little bit in that sometimes they're about procreation, sometimes they're about gift, and sometimes they're about fast access to pleasure for the purposes
Yeah.
of holding desire over time. Is that making sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's really great for couples to have some kind of weekly touch, and that can look, one of those three different ways. I think that's really healthy. However, that's not right for everyone. So it might be that every second week whenever you're not in the trying to conceive zone, it might be that every second week you have a designated night where you know that give the kids takeaways, and they've just got a 3-year-old, but you like give them cereal for dinner. They watch a movie that night so that you're got more energy. Like you do whatever is possible to give that day essentially more nourishment so
Yeah.
that you're in a better space for the intimacy time together. And that's why I'm a fan of the scheduling sex concept in those early years, because you do have to be quite intentional with your energy. So
Yeah.
you're not single, you're not like coming home from work and just having a couple of hours to yourself. You don't have
Having
the
a wine, having a
weekend.
shower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you don't have all of that downtime to rebuild, restore energy. So
Yeah.
if you're intentional about when you're having intimacy, you might be more likely to build nourishment into the day. Like, for example, for us, that would always, like, it's always helpful for me if we have a cleaner, like, that would be the day the cleaner comes, because,
Yes.
like, I'm way more chilled as a result.
Yeah.
And, that is the night
The
that the
house
kids
is clean and your
house is
brain feels
clean,
clean.
the kids eat pizza,
Yeah.
they have screen time. That's, a night that I might have cocktail because I don't drink every night. It's how do you
Yeah.
build in an environment in which you feel more relaxed and more able to give, as opposed to
Yeah.
just expecting that you're going to be up for that when the kids have been, like the 3-year-old's been crying at you for 12 hours and you haven't slept the night before and they've been sick for a week. So let's be
Yeah.
a little bit more intentional.
Totally. Yeah. I think that removing sex as the goal as well is like just such a huge one.
And we're removing
Once,
intercourse as the goal.
yeah, sorry, removing intercourse is the goal. Yes, sorry. My amateur terminology
Yeah,
here.
yeah. The whole thing is sex. One of the things that
Yeah.
one of my lecturers said when I was training was sex starts with a look and ends wherever you want. And
Oh, I love that.
yeah, it was so, I feel like it's really empowering.
Mm.
It gives you the power as a couple to determine what you want sex to look like for that particular time, knowing that another time it might look completely differently.
Yeah, totally. And I also think that removing intercourse is the goal. I feel like it means you get much more, like, once we started doing that, like our flirting came back and our like
Yes.
cheeky touches came back, like all that stuff started happening again when in our minds it wasn't like the only time that we have intimacy is when we have intercourse and it's like in this very one way at this one time,
Formulaic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Once we removed that, I feel like a lot of the like joy that this Anon is talking about missing, I feel like that
Yes.
came back a lot for us.
I recommend all couples for 3 months remove intercourse.
Wow.
And they just do it as an exercise of play and creativity.
Mm.
Just breaking the pattern of, oh, this is what I do and this is what it looks like every time. It totally disrupts it, and doing it for an extended period of time is really helpful.
Yeah. Cool. And just very quickly, if this person has never ventured into the idea of vibrators before, do you have like a recommendation for here's your starting point vibrator?
Yeah, to be honest, anything that's a bullet, so anything that's short and small, is a really great
Yeah.
starting point because it's good for partnered play as opposed
Cool.
to independent pleasure. Yeah, I think things that you can do, even while you're having intercourse, so you can just like accelerate the touch and the pleasure a little bit. Something that they can hold and use really easily, and you can also
Yeah.
use in all parts of your body. It can be part of a massage. So and
Yeah.
bullets are really cheap. They're usually about $50. So that's
Yeah.
actually there's one at Chemist Warehouse at the moment for $32.
Great. Oh, look at you. So up to date with the knowledge. I love it. Perfect. Awesome. And then we've got our last question, which this one made me go, oh, I don't even know as a social worker what I'd recommend. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear your take on this. And it is, we have a very good male friend who we've known for years and has recently come back into our lives. He's great with our kids, tells funny stories, hypes them up, but sometimes pushes them too far. He's the kind of person you'd ask to babysit the kids, but some little feeling holds me back. I'm not sure why, but also not sure how to address it if he ever offers to look after the kids. How do we politely decline without insulting him and essentially saying we mistrust him? I have a number of other friends who've worked in the legal/corrections industry who have blanket rules about leaving children with men. Should this just be a thing?
So hard.
Mm-hmm.
What I come back to, and it actually taking the man piece out of it, what I'm hearing there is a discomfort. And that's so you've got to take that discomfort seriously. And where I ultimately land every single time is this question that we were given when I was training as a counsellor, which is who's the client? So who's the person of primary importance? And you revolve your decision making around them. So in counselling world, that was when I was working with kids, and we would have challenges with the parents, and it was, how much do I cater to the parents versus the child? And the training was who's the client? And you have to know who your client is. And for me, obviously, when I was working with kids, the child is always the client. So I revolve all my decision making around them. And when you're a parent, your child is the client.
Yeah.
So this guy, lovely, could be phenomenal guy, is not the client. They are not the person you revolve your decision making around. So, it would be strange to make a decision about your child's safety based on his discomfort. That wouldn't really make sense, because you'd be compromising on something you're feeling based on him just feeling better. And that's not how we make decisions for our kids. So we make decisions around what we think is going to be best for them, no matter who the person is. And I think that it might be best for them to create some kind of blanket rule that might not be about men. It could be, we only let someone babysit when we've known them for X amount of years, or the kids have known them for X amount of years, or if the kids have said that they're okay with that person and then it's not feeling ready with you yet. Or you can change the categories, but ultimately who's the client? And I have been in similar situations where I've had somebody offer babysitting and I just have not taken that up, and that's been hard, but I can't make decisions based on someone else's feelings.
Yeah.
Like trying to make their life better just doesn't make sense in the hierarchy of who's important. Yeah. So it's not an easy process, but if you've got some discomfort in yourself, you just really have to listen to it.
Go with that gut.
Yeah, like I know people who work in the social work sector or the youth work sector, for example, and in their hiring policies, so when they're employing someone, they land with their intuition. And so it can be everyone's great on paper, but something feels off. You don't hire that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same with babysitting.
We're literally taught that in a social work degree. Obviously, there's like theories and stuff behind it, but probably 90% of my lecturers would say usually if you've got a gut feeling about something or someone, keep exploring. Don't, actively interrogate someone. But if there's something that feels niggly or off, keep that in the back of your mind and keep that as you're going forward and you're interacting and engaging with this person. And I've taken that into my career, and honestly, I would say 95% of the time something will come out about that person or something will be revealed that confirms that gut feeling.
Yeah, I mean, just to address the male thing, like I have men look after our kids. We've got lots of very close male friendships, but I have when my kids go on camp or they're away outside of my zone, I always tell them that if they're really in trouble, to find a mum.
Yeah.
And I said this actually to a dad recently, and I was like, I'm really sorry if that doesn't feel right for you. I just tell them to find a mum. And the guy was good. There was a dad and he's got, got a number of kids, and he was like, I agree. Like, I support that. I would tell my kids to go and find a mum. And that's just the data. Like, that's just the research is that, women tend not to harm. And their primal instinct is so strong to protect. And so I just literally based on the evidence, I think it's a helpful part of the package of how you make a decision.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think just a very quick adjacent question, because I know I've seen this question asked a lot of times, and I feel like a question coming up a lot on social media. What is your stance on children going to sleepovers?
It's a general no. They have 2 places they're allowed to sleep over, the boys, and there was only one place they were allowed to sleep until they were 10. And then it went to 2 places. When they were at school, and that sometimes was challenging. I just said, look, I'm sorry, the rule is that we have to have known a family for at least 5 years. And known being the important word, not just like I see them at school pickup.
Yeah.
So yeah, not an acquaintance, but a knowing. And so the boys knew that, and that pretty much got us through the primary years. And then they were 10 and they had one other family that they could go to. And it's just been, I would say that's stricter than most families, but it's also like we don't have any family support in the city. So there's some realities there of needing to build family/community with other families that aren't your blood.
Yeah, totally. Amazing. Thank you, Jo. This was such a good first episode of Why Do You Expert Like That. I'm stoked.
You've got a long future ahead of you of experts.
I hope so. And I'm sure that people will have lots of questions to ask you in the future, so we might have to get you back at some stage too.
Happy to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Why do you parent like that?
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Why Do You Parent Like That? Why Do You Parent Like That is a podcast created and hosted by me, Abby Harrison. A big shout out to my nephew Thomas and my niece Frances for lending their voices to my jingle, and to everyone who is helping me with their expertise on podcasting while I figure this out. Any resources mentioned in today's pod will be linked in the show notes alongside our sponsors. Please follow Why Do You Parent Like That on your podcast platform of choice, and follow us on our TikTok and Instagram at Why Do You Parent Like That podcast for more behind the scenes and reveals of upcoming guests. If you have a story you think would be great to share, please send me an email at whydoyouparentlikeThatpodcast@gmail.com. Love you. Say it back.